Hello, everybody, and welcome to our review of Star Trek Picard, Episode 8, Broken Pieces. This is the third to last episode in the series, just two more, and we'll see how everything wraps up. This is Ash, I'm here with Saib, and hello to all of you who are watching live and talking in the chat already. It's great to see you all. Hello, Saib, how are you doing today?
Good. It's moving along pretty well. Um, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. It's also a good distraction from all the crazy stuff happening outside. Oh
yeah,
lordy, is it
the world
crazy?
is a little crazy, so we like to
Hmm.
sometimes look toward the optimistic future of Star Trek now. I was watching another review that was pointing out how this is a far less optimistic show. Although I think it's going to end up being more optimistic. Although I have a feeling it's going to end on a massive cliffhanger of some impending doom. I just have
Hmm.
this disturbing feeling that that's going to be the case. Which is we know it's been renewed for a second season, and
Well,
the typical yada yada that we do at the beginning of these shows. We don't like the direction that CBS has taken Star Trek in general, and the things that Alex Kurtzman has been doing with the series. Um, we like to make that clear.
Discovery Discovery should be renamed Disgrace.
Yeah,
Like
I actually I was talking
it
to
really is a
a friend of mine who actually really likes Discovery, which was weird. It was the first time I'd ever heard somebody say anything positive about Discovery, and we're not friends anymore. I'm just kidding, but it was weird.
just about.
I mean, there's a lot of talk about how the Orville should be or is what Star Trek should be, and that's probably true. Anyway, it is what it is as far as the state that Star Trek's in right now, and in the midst of all that, I feel like this has this is shaped up to be a decent show. It's definitely had a lot of problems. There's definitely been a lot of
Hmm.
stuff that Saib and I have both been like, why would you do that? That's like just too idealistic and optimistic, maybe. Like the whole thing with Picard tearing down the sign and walking into the cafe that says Romulans only. It's like, okay,
What?
I get your idealism there, dude, but that's also really stupid. Like, if these
Yeah.
guys pick a fight with you, you're dead. Like, you're just dead.
Or they end up getting killed too.
Or they end up getting
It's
killed, which is what happened, and then he blamed Elnor for it, and it's like, well, you're the one who provoked it. I don't even think
yeah.
we pointed that out when we reviewed that episode, but yeah,
No,
Picard
no,
provoked
I
that
think
situation.
I think we did. It's really ridiculous. Just there's so many things that make you kind of crazy with this particular thing. And again, we understand it, and we're not covering for that. But the other side of the coin is that TNG was a spectacular show. As much as it had its serious problems, which it had, um, but TNG was one of these things that was like pivotal to my life as a sci-fi fan. Right, it's the first sci-fi show that I ever watched. I remember watching it was a single episode of the very first season when it first aired in my part of the world, in which we had just graduated from a temporary shelter, which was basically, I mean, was one step above like outhouse plumbing, and was on the what many people call the fringes. This was where people tied their horses to wooden posts outside the general store. Okay, this is literally how how in my part of the world where I grew up in, how far we were away from technology in general. This was I think a year before or a year after my dad had to equip himself with winter gear, put on snowshoes and snow skis, and trekked 3 hours to my grandparents' place to get food, and then trekked 3 hours back again after spending some time there warming up to make sure that we didn't die during the wintertime. Okay, so this is where sci-fi met living on what really was the last vestiges of the Wild West, basically. Like I said, horses tied to wooden beams outside general stores, like stores that's the only store in the town, and that's the world in which I grew up in. No, I did not drink blue milk. I
Time Bean's wondering if you
blue
grew up in the
milk.
same town as her. Yeah.
Possibly. So this is just, and what I'm really getting at here is that this is probably the last time we will see um, Picard serve as his role, as far as the original actor goes, in a Star Trek series, and that's why we're actually reviewing the show. We're not reviewing the show because we like the general direction of the show, or because we feel that CBS has done such an amazing job with the series overall. They really haven't. They really haven't. But it's also, like I said, it's the last time we're probably going to see this. Now, of course, they've renewed it for a second season, and um, the goal is to stretch it out to, like, I think the rumor is the goal is to stretch it out to like 4 to 5 seasons or something like that, and use it as a way of introducing a couple of new shows. But a lot of that stuff is kind of falling flat right now. CBS is they said they've greenlit a whole bunch of shows, and that, oh, all these new Star Trek shows are coming. But what you find out when you start actually digging down is that, yeah, they've been said that they've been cleared and that they're ready to go, but there's no production team working on them. There's no, like, there's one production team working on one show out of the three that have been announced, on top of Picard, and we I cannot find anybody who's working on the other two. Now that's kind of suspicious, and it kind of says to me that they're saying that there's this big future for this series, when really there isn't, because they're waiting to see how Picard does. And so that's the quandary that we're in, right? So do we want more sci-fi in the Star Trek universe, or do we just want to bypass it all? That's the question that we end up coming up against, and
Mm.
it's kind of a disturbing one. So
Well, we want, and I
again,
mean, I think a lot of people would love more Star
mhm,
Trek that is
yeah,
actual classic Star Trek.
yeah, absolutely,
And as I've said before, I'm okay with them experimenting and doing a spin-off like this, which is just a completely different kind of show, focusing on a
yeah,
character instead of a crew.
yeah, and that is the interesting. And there's lots of really. This episode was really interesting in a lot of ways. It shows, um, kind of sort of a little spoiler, is that no, actually, Starfleet's not all bad. What it is it has some bad leadership right now. And again, we can point out the problems that we have
Hmm.
been, but it's really interesting to kind of note that down, be like, oh, this
Yeah,
is
well,
actually
that's, I don't know.
really
That sounds like
interesting.
a lot of the game companies we talk about.
Yeah,
Interesting.
yeah, quite possibly. As
Yeah,
far as yes, is Picard doing better than Discovery? Absolutely, it is 100% that it's doing way better than Discovery. Generally, the ratings are up quite significantly. We don't have like hard numbers because it's spread out so much, and that, like I mentioned that in the very first episode that we did, we covered. It's like, where do we watch this thing? Because if it's like, oh well, if you're in this country, you have to watch it on this. If you're in that country, you can't watch it on that thing or this thing that it's on airing in this other country and that other country. It's just so, like, it's so crazy and stupid because it's all over the place, and they haven't really, like, done the advertising. Like, there should be advertising for this every week, but there's next to no advertising. Why? Because they have next to no budget. There's a reason why the show is populated by like 10 actors, and legitimately, like, just those 10 actors. Like there's a whole bunch of episodes or scenes, or like, when you really, like, lay it out, and this is why they have the show like this. Most of the scenes that you're seeing, because there's a lot of, like, jumping around from place to place to place to place, a lot of those things were all filmed in like a very short time period. Like, all of certain characters time or watching is basically condensed down to like probably like a week or two of acting. So they show up, they do all their acting, boom, done. That's all their parts done, and then they move on to film on another set with all the other actors that have to intersect with that one there again. And so really there's very few actors that are actually concurrent throughout the whole series. In fact, right now the only characters that have been on more than one set are Picard, um, what's his face, Elnor, Legolas, whichever one you want to refer to him as.
Romulan Legolas, yep.
Yeah, Romulan Legolas, Shoji, and or all of her other alternates.
Well, she's been everywhere, yeah, because she's been
And Picard, and those are the only people. Oh, sorry, Picard and Seven of Nine. Those are the only people that have been on more than essentially just one set. Well, I guess
Rios came with them onto Free
Rios
Cloud.
and Rios and what's her name? Rafi.
Yeah, Rafi. So I mean, I see what you're saying though. Like, yeah, there's some like for Dr. Zarate, like after the first couple episodes, she basically has been confined to the ship, kind of a thing. But yeah, it's a low budget show. A lot of the budget probably went to Patrick Stewart, and then you know you have a whole bunch of other actors, but yeah, like it's not like Jonathan Frakes was a regular in the series. He was in one episode. And Jerry Ryan, I mean, she's been in 2 now. Slight spoiler about this episode. Of course, we're assuming that you have seen the episode. I know at least one of you hasn't, who's in the chat right now. But anyway, you're here of your own free will. Yeah, we should start getting into the episode. But yeah, I actually, this was my favorite episode of the series so far.
Mm-hmm.
I think the show has really started to pick up. It went through a lull, and then episode 7 it started to pick up again, and this episode was
which I mean, in retrospect is not that many. Like when you're counting the original length of the original series and all of those episodes, 7 episodes to devote to backstory and filling people in is not actually that much.
Well, yeah, but they wouldn't, like, you look back at the way they used to make TV shows as opposed to how they make them now.
Mm-hmm.
There were, back in the 90s when they were doing TNG, there were far fewer of these long episode arcs. Like, there would be like recurring things and like season long, an event that happens in season 3 that they call back to in season 5, but then they'll remind you of what happened if you haven't seen that episode. But I mean, in general, you could pluck most episodes out of, say, The Next Generation and understand what's going on in the episode if you haven't seen any other episodes. Not so here anymore. Like, if you try jumping in on episode 6 or 7 or 8 of this show, like you're going to be completely lost. And that's the difference in how they're making the shows here, right? Like, it's not isolated episodes. Yeah, like Time Bean points out, like, and they'd have episodes that focus on certain characters, or a certain encounter, or a certain interaction between characters on the ship. They'd be more. The episodes were way more self-contained than what they're doing here.
Mm-hmm.
Not to say one is better than the other. I think it's good to try different things, and I like the long. I do like the long arcs that certain shows do, but in this case, there was like 2 or 3 solid episodes devoted to mostly exposition about what the hell's going on in the world and who the hell these characters are. And that got a little slow, but then here near the end of this first season, things have started picking up, and I like that. So, All right, nice shot of some space dust, debris, nebula, something.
I want to just point out that the one thing that the low budgetness of the show is able to do, thankfully, like, I mean, I talked about how I could see like drywall in one of the sets the other day, and I was like, oh Lord, is it terrible? Just, I mean, the budget for the sets on this versus like, Voyager is astounding. It's astounding. But at any rate, what they do have nice is really nice space shots. They have a lot of really nice space shots, and they also have a lot of really nice ship stuff. Because again, a lot of that is really really easy to make. Like it's shocking how much like cinematic sci-fi stuff you could make with just ship battles and stuff like that. And this is one thing that I think they've been missing, and I hope that they like get into a little bit more. There was certainly like a fair amount of it this episode, and hopefully there's more. But yeah, it's pretty cool stuff. So.
Yeah, the CG. I mean, the CG is really good, but like, yeah, the this to animate a ship flying is easy as like compared to like character animation and like animating like a person or a living being. Animating ships flying around is nothing. So
yeah.
We start out with another flashback, and this goes back to, I can't remember how early before the episode this goes back to, but this is the
years and years before. Yeah.
It's years before. I just can't remember if it's before or after the attack on Mars, but
it's before the attack on Mars.
Yeah. So
it's well before the attack on Mars.
We see Commodore O and a bunch of Romulans, and we find out in this episode that Commodore O is half Romulan, and that kind of
dun, dun, dun.
Yeah. There's a lot of things that get explained in this episode. There's a lot of exposition that happens in a really organic way, and so I appreciated that about this episode too. But there's this weird octenary star system, which that we find out later in the episode was artificially created, presumably, and there's this there's this thing that they can psychically link to here. Here's Commodore O, half Vulcan, half Romulan. And there's this thing that they can put their hands on, this energy thing that like is a repository of memories, she calls it, from an ancient civilization, like hundreds of thousands of years prior, that left warnings about what's going to happen if you create or if you allow synthetic life to exist and evolve. And this explains so much about what's actually happening in this series. And then we see Rhonda here, who is the crazy Romulan lady that we encountered earlier in the series on the Borg cube. And this is pre-assimilation. So after this, she went and got assimilated and then got de-assimilated. And then we see her later. And then we have Narek's sister, whose name I can never remember. Narissa Rizzo was her name, was her Starfleet name. I can't remember if this is her actual name or not, but yeah, so they're here. So they put their hands on this thing, and then they see the visions, which are very similar to the visions that Commodore O showed to Dr. Zarate in the mind meld. So there's some. This is so we have confirmation now that we're seeing stuff that happened a long time ago, and that the Zhat Vash exists to prevent this from happening again by eliminating all synthetic life. So really interesting. Yeah, explains a lot of what's going on in the series now. Of course, we see the visions they see drive a lot of them insane.
Yeah, so there's a few things with this that are like weird. So there's this octenarian star system, which is 8 stars rotating around each other, and a planet at the dead center of this. So the planet does not rotate around the stars. The stars rotate around the planet and rotate around themselves. Very interesting. Yeah, their outfits are great. But then on the planet, is set up this one like little beacon thing that is a warning symbol, which for the most people that use it go crazy. And that's people who are psychically gifted and can withstand this kind of stuff normally. So if I were a government and, running a Starfleet of some kind, or some star system or whatever, and one of my explorers said, hey, we discovered a really weird star system that looks like it was created in the last like 300,000 years, and there's this warning beacon on the planet. And I'm like, okay, what happens when we touch the warning beacon? Well, everybody goes mad. Well, except for a very small number of people who then proceed to act like they're crazy by doing really crazy, ridiculous things. My first reaction to that would be, huh.
Well, I think that my theory is that the reason that Narissa didn't go insane is because she was already crazy AF anyway. But
yeah.
Anyway, continue.
I would have been like, all right, let's either blow it up, or like, how much evidence did they relay? Like, was there like vast stores of like, intrinsic searchable data, or was it just some crazy flashes that you get? And again, like, oh no, it's just a bunch of crazy flashes and premonitions and stuff like that. Huh. Yeah. Okay. Probably not going to set my government on. I'm probably not going to create a government that revolves around this theory.
Well, that's the thing. Like, they believe that this is authentic and real, but like the aliens that set this up, maybe this was how maybe this was movies to them, and this was just maybe this was just the movie theater, and they were just a really psychically strong species, and they weren't expecting other people to come around and be like, hey,
so time being beat me to the to my point here, which was, now the same thing has happened before in this game called Mass Effect, where you had Shepard who saw the warning and who then went kind of more or less crazy to her superiors and was like, hey, you have to stop, the end is coming, the end is nigh. And it's like so I kind of get how and they were of course right, and what we might have here is correct, but I also want to point this out again, that, and I'm not shocked at all, that CBS has a serious problem with the writers for stealing other people's stuff. And stealing, I mean, I'm putting that in parentheses, hard, allegedly. But I find it really weird that this is like basically somebody took Mass Effect and The Expanse and put them in a blender and created this new storyline. Like, again, it appears as if the Star Trek show is just ripping off of a bunch of other stuff, because that's exactly what they did in Discovery. So, little annoyed with that, but it's handled pretty well here, so I can't complain too much.
It's hard to, like, almost any new thing has similarities to some older thing, but yeah, when there's a lot of instances, it starts to look suspicious. But so time being pointed out earlier, so the Borg then know about this. Interesting. And it's hard to say how much the Borg know, because apparently, so I'm just going to move to the next picture here. So we see
well, the Borg don't necessarily know about this. What I think was passed on was that the Borg, the cube went so crazy when they learned about this, that the cube, and this is why the cube was found just floating out there, not doing very much. But it just like when, as soon as they assimilated her and her knowledge hit that particular cube, or maybe it hit the greater like network of Borg as a whole, basically they shunted off all that information, and just that one cube went crazy.
Yeah.
And just ended up getting shut down. So that apparently there's apparently some weight to either this or to her insanity, and which is saying something, because I mean the Borg have routinely assimilated people that have either gone mad, gone crazy, or watched their entire civilization collapse to the Borg, and yet none of them were capable of doing the same thing. So
there's some power behind whatever this psychic imagery is that got put into their brains. I mean, most of the most of the Romulans that were in this circle, they after what they saw, I mean, a bunch of them were killing themselves. One, one person shot themselves. Another bashed their own head in with a rock. Like they went crazy. They went insane. Now, Rhonda went insane. The only one who seems unaffected is Narissa here, Narek's sister. And we also find out that.
Oh, well, I do a little big pause on that.
Well, she
most
didn't
people
win.
Are not mentally stable to the point where they start hitting on their siblings. I'm just saying that it seems to me that she got real good messed up because she is a little crazy normally, but she's also really crazy when it comes to
Yeah.
her brother. And,
Well, she's definitely she's definitely not sane, but she didn't have like a breakdown here.
Yeah.
But Rhonda did, and we also find out in the next scene here that Rhonda is her aunt, and she raised her and her brother, and has never entirely been sane. So maybe that's why she survived. These two seem to be the only two that survived that encounter. Maybe it runs in the family. I don't know. Yeah, that's right, Shua. She wasn't the sharpest disruptor in the ammo locker. It must work somehow. So, yeah, time being, it is saying something that collective could not contain it or drown it out. That's right, yeah, like the sheer force of sorrow and despair that was in Rhonda's mind spread to the cube, and basically, yeah, the entire cube went crazy, and then it got cut off from the collective. Yeah. So a bunch of exposition in this scene here. Oops, that's a different scene. So a bunch of exposition here. They find out that Narek and a whole bunch of other ships are on the way to Shoji's home planet. And I'm trying to think if there was any other exposition that happened there. She kind of recaps everything that happened here. And anyway, let's just move on. So Romulan Legolas is still on the Romulan cube. Or the Borg cube, owned by the Romulans, and he has pushed the that summoning button for the Rangers, which Picard had somehow dropped and left behind. So he's basically just waiting for help. And in the previous scene, someone's like, "Yeah, we traced him to the former office of the director of the Reclamation Project."
Yeah. Hold the. So I realized that we might actually be wrong on that point. It was not Picard's signal that he picked up. Picard was handed one. 2, what we believe is that Hugh actually had one.
That's right, because when Seven shows up in a minute, she's like, "Where's Hugh?"
Yeah, because she was expecting to see Hugh here, and he was not here. So this turns out that she basically, or she gave him one, and yeah, that's more or less the secret there. So barky bark. So yeah, so that's more or less a thing that I didn't pick that up initially or really tie that together.
Yeah, well, it wasn't clear where exactly he picked that thing up from, and it just looked like the one Picard had. So yeah, it was an assumption. But anyway, yeah, you're probably right. So he probably got that off of Hugh, who I'm bummed that they killed Hugh off.
Oh yeah, no, I'm super bummed about that because it's one of those things where it's like you kind of really wish that that they had taken the time to kind of like delve into that relationship a lot more, because not only was the character really well. I mean, the actor really played him well, and I'm shocked because the dude has been. I mean, he's been a decent actor all over the place for a number of years. He's nothing to sneer at, but he's also he also played a really good role, and he did an amazing job. And I've got to say that again, there's a lot of the directing that's going on here that again, whether you like the story or not, the directing seems to be pretty decent. Again, the story, there's lots of things that make you pause with the story and go, oh my God, why do they not know the lore? Do they not know the story? But I have to say, and this was my big credit to the last episode, the actors and the people who are actually giving the directing, like who are lining up the shots and who are doing the stuff, other than their love of bloom and light sources, other than that, they've been doing a really good job. A very good job. And that
Yeah, I didn't notice as much lens flare in this episode. Maybe I'm just growing accustomed to it. I don't know.
Yeah, but the just in general, the overall experience is really, really good as far as the actors are doing, and that's a credit to the actors and possibly the on-site directors, the film team.
Yeah.
That they don't have a say in what the story says, right? They're given the scripts, they have to do the scripts. The actors are given the scripts, they have to do the scripts. But the acting job that they're doing deserves praise for being good. And here I've got to really hand it to Hugh's actor, that I really, really will miss him as a character. I feel that his story was massively underutilized, and I'm very disappointed with that. But he did a very good job. I guess what's the other one? That android who blew up Mars. He did a really good job on that one too. Like again,
the
he was
actor
only
who did
there
that role
for a very short amount of time. I looked him up on Twitter and on Instagram and whatever, and he's really cool actor. But again, really well done. Like really, really well done. And again, that boils down to they have a decent film crew. Now, if they could just get the writing and the overall direction kind of like on track to a Star Trek show that we know and love, then I think it would improve a lot. But that's a big compliment that I want to give again to the actor of Hugh, because that when she shows up and she goes, "Where's Hugh?" It's like, oh, that got me in the feels. That got me in the feels just hearing her ask where he was and being upset that he wasn't there. So it's like, oh, that sucks. That really sucks.
Yeah, Icheb too. It's unfortunate what they did with Icheb. Yes, that's right, timing. And then even Elnor here, he's a really cool character, and he's being so underutilized. It's just like, okay, we need to have Elnor have a fight scene here. Like, he's had a few funny moments, but I feel like he's being underutilized.
Well, I mean, the show in general it's 10 episodes long. It is not a big show. They don't have a huge budget for this stuff. Again, I feel that the actors are really giving it their all, and I think I can really credit that to Picard, or to Patrick Stewart, sorry, to Patrick Stewart and the effect that he has on people. People love working with Picard because he's very funny. He's hilarious in person. He's very kind, and I mean, again, you might not necessarily like all of his personal ideas and concepts, but he is a mountain of a man, despite the fact that he's actually quite short and small in his old age.
Yeah,
but
you see
but
that.
he has a very strong personality, and he's very forceful. And again, professional courtesy. The man deserves an Emmy and genuine respect for what he's done. Again, one more time, not because of the story, not because of the writing, but because of the bald mountain of a man that he is. So
yeah.
No,
the writing, I think the writing is definitely where the problem is in this show. All right, so 7 of 9 shows up, kicks some butt. Yeah. And it's weird because the Romulans, they close in on Elnor and they attack him, but then it's like hand-to-hand fighting. It's like
well, they throw in a grenade, and
it's like a flashbang. It looks like they're trying to take him alive.
Yes. Well, they're obviously trying to take him alive because they want to know what he knows about Picard, and they're doing what Romulans do, right? The Romulans are trying to get as much information on these people as they can. They want to torture him for as long as possible, right? And they like, until they know that they're not, the person's going to get away, that's when they've decided that they're just going to kill them outright. What they did with Hugh. So I think mostly, as far as things go, um, there's a good chance that they were wanting to capture him to torture him for information, find out what Picard knew, find out what everything where they were headed, find out any information that they could. And if they lost 10, 20, 30, Romulan agents in the process, that's fine. Who cares? Right? That's literally how they think. And so it's like, okay, whatever.
Still,
So
don't their... No, I guess disruptors don't have a stun setting, but don't they have anything that could just... I don't know. Seemed like they went about it in a very inefficient way.
They threw in a grenade. They threw in a stun grenade, and he clearly did some meditation thing, literally standing right on top of the grenade, and was able to shrug off most of the effect. So I put that down to specialized training. So
maybe looks like it was just a flashbang.
Yeah,
like it was just a blast of light.
They were expecting him to be severely knocked out, and he wasn't. So that's
clearly,
that's
yeah. He recovered.
And also, apparently, stun grenades really suck in this universe. I gotta say, they should really take Starfleet could learn a lot from the Stargate universe here, because they've got grenades that knock out everybody in 100-meter radius who's not undercover. So yeah, everybody's boom, down, and it's like a really good weapon.
Yeah. There's occasional times in Star Trek where you see somebody use a phaser with a wide spread to stun a whole bunch of people at a time. And it's like, why don't you use that more? Anyway, you don't have the picture of Elnor hugging 7 of 9 here. It was quite a kind of a tender, sweet, adorable moment, because he's all alone. He kicks all his butt, and then 7 shows up. He's like, "You're here. You're my friend." Yeah.
So he shows up. So Picard and Shoji teleport to the ship, and right away, Rios goes kind of cuckoo. And again, I chalked that up at first. I chalked that up to him just being again, not anything against the actor, because as we later see in this episode, his acting chops when he's playing all the different holograms is hilarious, brilliant, and deserves recognition. But Rios, the character, I first chalked this up to him just being absolutely stupid and pathetic, and might as well have just have the holograms run the ship at this point, because the captain dude is clearly incapable of much of anything. But as we discover, it's because as soon as she ports onto the ship, he immediately recognizes her, which suddenly is like, oh, okay, there's more here. So then we start to discover more about the backstory here that's happened. But yeah, he's all like, what? And then he goes all super moody and tells Picard, he's just like, fine, I'm gonna take you to the stupid place, and then I'm gonna drop you off there, and then we're done. And then he storms off. We're all angry so yeah.
That's his character, though. That's he's
that's his character. And like I said, his acting character is fine. But up until now, I've had a major complaint with Rios in that the dude seems completely and totally inept to be a captain.
Which I disagree with, because I don't.
I know you disagree with it, but that's
he makes a mistake here and there, but he's, and I mean, he dips into the sauce every now and then, so it's a good thing you have a navigation hologram. But anyway, okay. However, Rafi's not happy.
Nope.
She's
she pulls a gun
because
she's all like.
So they have figured out now that Dr. Zarate killed Bruce Maddox, and so she doesn't like that Picard is bringing a second unknown variable onto the ship, and is like, the only thing you know about her is that she was made from one of Data's neurons, which is a fair point. He really doesn't know anything about her. So she does have a fair point about him being a little bit reckless here. But anyway, he gets her to calm down somehow, and then they take her in, and explain how they know that Dr. Zarate killed Bruce Maddox. So this finally was addressed. I don't know how they didn't figure it out earlier, because she freaking turned. What we find out, like she freaking turned off the thing that was keeping
Yeah.
Bruce alive, and then I don't know if she like did she turn it back on again. There must have been a record that it was just switched
No,
off.
he says that, oh yeah, she turned off this and then she shut my program off, and at no point did he apparently have the ability to notify the captain that there was a murder being committed on his ship, which again I'm infuriated with, because again, just like basic, like this isn't something that oh man, we've had 20 murders this year on starships, maybe we should do something about it. No, that's something that was like thought of like 50 years ago when they were designing basic protocols. It's like well, then again, I mean, I don't know, maybe basic protocols are something that are routinely thrown out and are completely restarted, because how many starships do we see where there's like no safety rails, on a drop that would take you down to your death should you suddenly be lurched to the side on a ship that routinely lurches you to the side. I mean, I guess that's probably pretty good. Oh yeah, and that there are no use of cameras again. Time being with the hole in one there. Where's the security system tracking and recording things so that if you do have an infiltrator on board that you can like identify what they did?
Yeah, this is a
At the very
universe where they
least.
have, in the second episode or whatever, they use that like residual particulum whatever
Hmm.
thing to recreate exactly what happened in a room, and yet they can't figure this out. Like, yeah, the technology does seem to be inconsistently applied, and that's something that is not. We even talked about it with the way phasers work just a minute ago. Um, it's something that is a common problem in sci-fi when you have this super advanced technology that does this awesome thing, but they only seem to know about it in one episode, and then it's never used
Hmm.
again. Or superheroes have the same kind of thing. There is a bit of a there's that kind of a risk when you're writing those kinds of things, but yeah, it does seem really weird that it took them this long to figure out that Dr. Girardi, like something should have been flagged for Rios's attention or something. Um, or as soon as like when Maddox was dead, somebody should have been looking at the records and been like, yeah, blah blah blah. Wait a minute, like this was switched off, and Dr. Girardi was the only one in the room, and she switched off the EMH at this time code, and yeah, it's uh, it's interesting. It's a plot convenience, is all it is. It's a plot
Hmm.
convenience so they could have this pop up when they wanted it to, basically. So that's one of the biggest problems I have with the writing in this show is how things are written like that. Just tons of plot conveniences, tons of just stuff happening at very very convenient times, and just because reasons.
Yeah.
Okay, so Picard's talking to the Admiral here, and he's like, okay, so here's the deal. You thought I was crazy. Turns out I'm not crazy. References to Don Quixote, and uh, you need to help me. You need to send ships. You need to this. And if you say it's not, and she's trying to cut in and say, yes, we're sending you a fleet to help. Um, but he keeps talking over her, and then finally we find out she actually is sending a fleet to help to rendezvous at Deep Space 12. So I wonder if when we get to Deep Space 12, I wonder if we're going to see any familiar characters there, or if they'll even spend
Yeah,
much time
yeah.
there.
Or if the so well, I mean, they don't end up heading to Deep Space 12 because obviously budget can't afford that, but instead they head off in a different direction, which so
Oh yeah,
here's
that's
here's
right. Yeah,
my
that she hijacks the ship to go straight to the planet.
so here's my thought. I think what's going to end up happening is that fleet of ships that is going to show up, they're going to start to put like two and two together, and you're going to have some good captains make the decision of they've got to go after Picard, and they have to go and help these people, and they have to go and save They have to start acting like Starfleet again, and that a certain person who was on the reserve list is probably going to end up showing up to head that group.
I wonder who that could be.
Whether that's this season or next season, we don't know quite yet. But you know, um, they're that person's going to show up and is going to be all like, we're here to save the day, Captain, and so there's going to be this big fight that ensues. But that this moment of like, them kind of like reaching back, because again, this episode we discover that that a lot of what was happening was planned from within. The synths didn't actually go crazy; they were ordered to go crazy, and they were then ordered to cover up their tracks, and that they were manipulated into this.
Well, yeah, we find out in this episode that the Romulans. I mean, we knew this, from before, but the Romulans were directly responsible for the attack on the Mars shipyards, and it was Commodore O, and it was done for the purpose of getting synths banned. Like that was the reason for it. Just reading the chat here, I guess it does make sense that they wouldn't necessarily have cameras in the medical bay, but it does seem like that they should.
No, that's exactly where you want cameras, in the medical bay.
Well, I mean, if they have, like, they don't have a camera in your doctor's office right now. Like, there could be a human rights privacy thing.
No, doctor's office, no. Medical surgery wing, yes.
Well,
and that's where he was essentially. He was in the intensive care section. Now there may have only been one section,
I don't think
but
it's
you still
one.
need a camera there. Like,
I'm
trust
just
me,
saying it could make sense. You could come up with a reasonable explanation of why there's no cameras, but there should still be records of what went on as far as machines getting switched on and off. So, anyway, so moving on here. So now this is where we get to the funniest part of this show, and one of the funniest things I've seen in a long time. Rafi sits down, thinks this is Rios piloting the ship. It's actually the navigation hologram, so his responses are like really funny and like just innocent and kind of dumb. And she eventually realizes she's not talking to Rios, and then she's trying to figure out why he had the reaction he had to Shoji when she got on the ship. And he tries to remember who she is, and he comes up with a different name. It's like Jaina or Gina or something. Jaya. Somebody that Rios had encountered in the past.
And what we discover here is that we literally have a scenario again. I hate saying this, but again, we apparently have a situation where it's Battlestar Galactica all over again. There's more than a small number of synths.
Yeah.
And these synths are limited to like a handful of types. So you've got the artistic female type, or the artistic male type, apparently, because the male apparently likes to draw things. Then you have the type where she's more of the intellectual, like smart, brainiac, heady type person. And yes, they're grown in twins. Each one is grown in pairs and twins. But then there's different models of those. But then they just keep on pumping out the same twins over and over and over again. So instead of cloning in singles, they clone in batches of 2. But because they don't have access to very many different types, they're limited to a number of particular types of clones. Which is great, because I don't know if you remember the one Star Trek episode where they encountered a planet that was run mostly by clones. That was very interesting.
It was very weird. But yeah, so there's a bunch of these on the.
Some people really hated that episode. Like I remember like looking up some like general talk on it. And there's people who hate that episode with a burning passion. Like, the very fact that they'd have these Irish people show up, which really seems to smack of racism. I mean, I'm just saying, it's like I go on these message boards like, I can't believe they brought in the blankety blank Irish, and it's like, what? Excuse me, what? So, but yeah, just that episode in general, that's kind of like where this is reminding me of. So again, I feel that they're pulling a lot of their like story writing and like concepts from previous episodes and or just other sci-fi series in general. But maybe you could say that to all sci-fi, right? So,
Well,
yeah.
it's hard
Or
to say
maybe
for
it's a
sure.
homage. Maybe it's a homage too,
Maybe.
right? So one could actually argue that it wasn't actually Battlestar Galactica that came up with that concept first. That technically it was Star Trek. So maybe they're just copying themselves, not somebody else. Oh, so I'll give them credit on that one. So, anyways, um,
Yeah.
yeah.
All right. So they're investigating the scene here where Elnor and Seven took out the Romulan
hmm
guards.
She realizes that somebody's got a gun, and she goes, "Wait, the guy doesn't use a gun."
Yeah. So she knows
Uh-oh.
there's somebody else. They find the Ranger tag, and she figures out who it is. Anyway, so they go into
hmm
the Borg Queen chamber here, and Seven of Nine just starts doing this Borg voodoo magic, which is really awesome.
hmm
And there's a lot of callbacks here to Seven of
Yep.
Nine and the Borg Queen and the
Well, I mean, just general callbacks like this next. I think is it this next scene, but the control node tentacle robotic tentacle thingies come down from the ceiling like it does in all of the other Borg Queen stuff from all of the other shows. So thank God they at least got that right.
well, I
Um,
think somebody on this show knows something about Star Trek. And even though they've changed
mhm.
up the designs of things somewhat, like we see the regenerating cube here. So she sets the cube to start regenerating, and she decides she's going to take over the cube and steal it and
Mhm.
you know be really badass, which I hope we see more of that. Yeah, so cut back to the ship where Picard's talking to Shoji, and they have a discussion about whether or not she likes eggs. It's really deep and all that.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's just a discussion about it's kind of character development for her, realizing, okay, you asked me if I like the eggs, but I don't know if I actually like them or if it's just because I was programmed to or what.
Mhm.
She's having some existential issues. Rafi's still questioning the holograms. They determine that she determines that an octenary system is pretty, almost
Almost nigh
non-existent.
impossible.
That it would happen naturally. So she figures that it must have been engineered, and she's also still trying to figure out what's going on with Rios. And it's really funny because then they have this guy have a Scottish accent, which I think is probably a callback to Mr. Scotty.
It was this particular type is my absolute favorite one so far because uh, he's this really funny Scottish guy.
Yeah,
Yes.
and he's the engineer, so Scottish engineer.
Yep.
So
Yep.
it's the Scotty. Yes, time being
It's
existential. She's
definitely
having
a
an
top. Yeah.
existential crisis.
Oh dear.
Nice. Oh man, the chat is great today. Okay, so yeah, so this is leading up to another shot of Mr. Scottish Man, and this is leading up to one of the funniest things ever. This is the hospitality. So she goes back to her room for a drink, and then the hospitality hologram appears because her replicator's not working, and then he's like, "Oh, you locked yourself out from being able to replicate alcohol, and you locked yourself out from the override, and you locked yourself out from the meta override or whatever it's called."
Yeah. That's funny.
And they start talking about how, okay, so Rios, all the holograms look like Rios because he selected the self scan function when he acquired the ship, and he claims it was an accident, but he never reverted it. But that's why all of the 5 basic holograms look like him. But then he went in
Mhm.
and did some deletions, and some random stuff gets deleted. Like this guy can't remember.
He deleted certain character types. So um, there's certain hologram types that had access to certain pieces of information, and when he deleted them, he caused a kind of like a cascade deletion of other pertinent data, and he was doing so to cover up what he knew.
Well,
And as we realize why he did that was because he's the whole thing with his previous captain is like stricken from records, so they can't recall what happens. He is the only person who knows what happens, because if those holograms had that access to that information, then I mean he would be in violation of Starfleet orders, and
yeah.
if that was ever discovered, he would end up spending a long time in jail, because just like we have today, you can commit all kinds of crimes and get 5 years, 10 years, 4 years, sometimes more, sometimes 20 years. But if you threaten the establishment, especially the establishment's like money and or secrets, you can end up in jail for multiple lifetimes times multiple lifetimes. Like, I find it weird that out of all the high class people being sent to jail recently, there's a couple high class stories of like 3, 7, 5, 15, 20, and then like 400 years for the dude who didn't commit a violent crime, just stole from some big corporations.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So that's what's going on here, is that he deleted that info so that he didn't step on Starfleet's the secret police of the Starfleet series, which we know they have one.
Yeah. So to answer your question, Time Bean, so when he scanned himself, presumably that copied some of his memories or all of his memories or something into these holograms. And then he had to go in and delete that info. And while he was doing it, he kind of did a sloppy job. And now this guy, the hospitality hologram, can't remember what temperature to make a certain kind of tea at. It's yes, definitely go watch the episode. It's really funny. Funniest part is still yet to come. What is this, by the way? This next picture. I don't even remember this in the episode, Saib.
This is his collection of mermaids. The dude has a fascination with mermaid sculptures or statues or miniatures or whatever. They're literally everywhere.
Huh.
So, I this was the most interesting one to me, just personally. But he's got a whole shelf of just mermaid statues.
That's interesting. Doesn't seem like a mermaid type of guy.
Just mermaid statues. So there's obviously a history of captains putting mermaids on their ships or collecting mermaid related stuff. There was a time where any captain, you could give them a carving or a depiction or a painting of a mermaid, and they would consider that good luck. And if you happen to have a really good one, and you got boarded by, say, pirates or something like that, and pirates like, oh, I'm going to put you off, you'd be like, sir, I have a gift for you. And then you unroll this thing and you present him with this gift of a carved mermaid. If it was good enough or nice enough, the pirate, no matter who he was, would look at it and go, okay, we're going to drop you at the next port. We're not going to kill you. You're fine. You're fine. I don't know why the pirate's Russian, but that's how it goes. So it was just something that for some reason really like made me go, oh, really interesting.
Well, they have a bunch of things in Star Trek that harken back to sort of old nautical traditions and things like that. So it does make some sense. So Rios is he's kind of looking back, and we discover what happened to his old captain, who he referenced earlier in the series. And so, let's just go back to this here. So really, really briefly, basically, when he was serving under this captain, they encountered two synths in a ship, and it was basically a first contact scenario. They sent the scans to Starfleet, and then they got, I think he called it a black flag order from Star Trek, so like a really covert hush-hush, saying the captain got this and said, you've got to kill those two individuals that you've taken onto your ship, and if you don't, we're gonna destroy your ship.
yeah, apparently they have apparently this group has a basically like a self-destruct code that they can send to any ship to just blow it up. They may have bluffed him with that. They may have told him with that, but that was apparently Commodore O who said, "Hey, you kill those two people, like straight out. You do not allow them to get there, or we destroy your entire ship."
So
Period.
so the captain did that, and then was racked with guilt, and Rios gave him heck. And anyway, the captain killed himself, and then Rios did the cover up to save the rest of the crew. So really traumatic kind of a thing. But it was again part of this initiative of Commodore O to eliminate all synthetic life. Back to Seven and Elnor here, and so she decides to take over the cube, and so the Romulans start destroying all of the not only the drones that are left on the cube that haven't been reclaimed, but also the XBs that have been unassimilated. And so Seven decides to take drastic measures and like tap herself into the cube and create a little mini collective. Now, sadly,
Well,
I feel
interestingly
like
enough, before we get to that, just interestingly enough, when she's describing what the options are to each of, she's like, I could like basically like assimilate them, take over their individuality and remove it, and she finds this a horrible thing. But then she says something interesting. She's like, he says, well, why don't you just let them go and we're done? She's like, they may not want to be let go, and I may not want to let them go either. Which means, and as we discover that, because I've been watching through the last Voyager episode I watched was the one where she confronted the Borg Queen, and that it's apparently she still has this strong temptation to rejoin the collective, to rejoin the Borg, and this is something that is extremely tempting still to
yeah,
her.
even
It's
after
something that
all
she's,
of
yeah,
these years.
after all these years, it's still, and I was expecting at first in this one particular scene, I was expecting her to do all this and then to be like, no, we will simulate everything, and for him to like pull out a sword and like cut the control things off of her back. I was expecting that, but no, that did not happen. So it was,
No,
but yeah, it
and
was very tense because
she wound up not having any drones to control, which is I feel a wasted
not,
opportunity.
no. She has all of the XBs, or she's controlling them all,
The
and we
XBs,
see
but
the XBs.
they'd been
They have
disconnected.
no, just like her, just like all the other Borg, just like Picard. Even you get them close enough with enough of that juice, because you don't need to be assimilated to be affected by the Borg's assimilation technology. We've seen this in a number of instances in several shows, but mostly in Voyager. Um, you do not have to be quote unquote assimilated with technology to fall into the system. You can be suppressed by this, essentially what is what works out to be like some like an empathic psychic signal telling them or forcing them to behave in a certain way. And that's how so when they capture people, they put them under this field, and it's hard for them to get shaken out of it. You can shake them out of it, but it's difficult. And
Yeah, okay.
then
No, I mean that makes sense because
and then
you see the XBs
yeah,
working in unison. But I'm talking about the actual drones that hadn't been
yes,
reclaimed
yeah,
yet.
yeah.
None of them, like the Romulans, just blasted them all out into space.
Yes, because this is I think they kind of had to for the most part, because most of these Borg, so like a combat Borg, basically like, you get a phaser or a phaser weapon or some kind of disruptor, you're good for like maybe 3-4 shots against a group of these creatures, a group of Borg. But as soon as they adapt, then I mean you're basically done. You got to fight hand to hand at that point. And I mean a combat drone, which we never really saw some of the really like heavy duty combat drones. Um, there was never really any scenes where they actually really focused on that, and it kind of sucks because there's always this like idea that Voyager should have like dealt with more of the different types of drones and kind of showcased it a little bit more, which I mean they did a lot more than most other people ever did, but in this one particular situation, it's like if they hadn't blown those all out to space, she would have had a big problem on her hand. And the XBs would have had a big problem on their hands, and probably like storyline wise, you couldn't have normalized Borg running around on the ship. They probably would have ended up doing a lot of things that were not necessarily healthy.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
By the way, for those of you in chat talking about that Voyager episode, yeah, that's the same episode that Saib just mentioned, and it's called Dark Frontier, and it's in season 5 or 6. Anyway, it's a 2-parter episode, Dark Frontier. I just watched it recently. That's how I have that fresh in my mind. So,
season 5.
Yeah. So, anyway, they do a lot of cutting around. So these screenshots are really jumping around because they're in chronological order from where they're.
Yeah. The scenes are back and forth. I didn't capture every scene. I just captured most of them. So.
And there was some weird editing in this episode. I will say, just from an editing standpoint, there were times when it was like intense music building and suddenly just cut off and cut to something else, and it was done really strangely. But anyway, that's a minor thing. This is the funniest scene in the show so far. Rafi gathers all of the holograms into Picard's study here, and or some kind of a holographic thing. Yeah, I think that's Picard's chateau, isn't it? She gathers them all, and they're all trying to talk. She's trying to figure out what happened with Rios, and so she's interviewing them all at the same time. It is such a funny scene. I don't want to spill anything. There's this moment here that Saib captured where they all clonked themselves on the head at the same time. This must have been complicated as hell to film, but they did a great, fantastic job of it. And this actor really has some versatility.
I love characters who conk themselves on the side of the head. I think it's just something that I generally appreciate.
Yeah. Whereas Rios went and he locked himself in his quarters. He's moping. So Rafi tried to talk to him, but he told her to just basically leave him alone. That's another funny moment, but I won't spoil it. All right, so Picard talking to Zarate here. Now, we've covered most of this already, so we won't go too in-depth, but basically he says, we're going to Deep Space 12, you're going to turn yourself in. She's like, okay. She explains why she did it. She explains about Commodore O and how she had to eat the tracker and the stuff that she poured into her mind, like all the images that she had been subjected to. So Picard now understands why Dr. Zarate did all this stuff. And then Shoji comes in and talks about how they're trying to fend off the coming of the Destroyer, which is what they... now that's what Rhonda had told... she had called Shoji the Destroyer in an earlier episode. And then is this? No, this is Rios. This is not one of the holograms. This is actually Rios, and so he finally lets Rafi in to talk to him. And again, she's the happiest little murderer on the planet, this one, Dr. Zarate. She's like, I'm done murdering people now. Okay.
It's like, sure you are.
Now that once you taste it. Okay, now back to Rafi, and so anyway, this is where he explains to her exactly what happened, and we've already gone over that, so I'm just gonna kind of skip through here. But here's the pic. Like somebody had drawn these two passengers, these two synth passengers that his captain killed. Somebody had drawn them, and he still had the picture. So
no. I believe that's him and
he drew
the girl. No, it's him in the picture.
Well, I can't remember what exactly what he said.
As it was described to me, as I understood it, her brother drew her and Rios sitting together at a table.
Okay, that could be.
Gave the picture to Rios because it looks that's Rios's beard and his youngerish face.
Could be. I wasn't really paying attention to that side of the photograph, or picture rather. But yeah, his. So anyway, so Shoji looks exactly like so these synths that Bruce Maddox has been cranking out. A lot of them look like Shoji.
Well, the problem is that once you create like a single droid has a real hard time replicating itself, but when you get several of them together, they start replicating themselves. Then things grow exponentially from there, extraordinarily quickly. That's the one danger that you have to have with synthetic AIs and true AIs is that they replicate extremely quickly, and you have to make sure that they're not out for blood because if they are, you're toast, and if they're not, then it's just like regular people. Well, they're all regular people. So
right.
Yeah.
Okay, fight time. So this is what's her face, Narissa, heading off to destroy all the XBs, which she has some success because they're kind of just standing around. They don't do much.
Yeah, they're not expecting her. Like they're just kind of standing there like in shock as she kills them. They're expecting to they've been on this place
like
for a
they
while.
barely even react.
Well, it's one of those situations that unfortunately it's like any current modern crisis that's happening at the moment where people one of the first reactions is shock. You don't believe what's happening is happening in front of you. Like you're just standing there, and this is what unfortunately happens a lot in moments of like pure chaos. Like I've been in a handful of those situations where either like somebody needs medical attention or there's something extraordinarily dangerous that's happened, and the first reaction for most people is to stand there in shock. I believe there was there's a famous story of a bank guard who was in a bank guarding, is standing there as a guard, and these guys in ski masks ran in with hoods on, and they ran up to him and they grabbed his weapon and they forced him on the ground, and somebody asked him like, why didn't you do anything? And he goes, I was so shocked that it was actually happening that I couldn't believe that it was actually happening. Like he wasn't prepared to actually react, and this is like why people should actually have like training. I was mentioning this actually to Time Being this morning. It's like people don't have drills other than like people have the occasional fire drill, but that's it. And then they're sitting there stunned when particular things happen. So I really think that this is what they captured here, and they captured this as well as them being somewhat standoffish and just a little bit slower.
Probably because of what
because of what they are.
Yeah.
But the reaction is not like some people say, why didn't they hit the deck or something like that? But again, it's like unless you're prepared for it, if something happens in a situation or scenario where you're not expecting it, the people just standing around looking stupid, that is the normal go-to reaction for about 80 to 90% of the population. There's a small number of the population that's instinctually runs towards problems or dangers, and it's a very, very small minority, which is one of the really cool things that, again, minor sidebar, that I really like about the story of My Hero Academia is because Deku runs towards problems even though he's powerless, and he runs towards situations to try and help, and that's something that they captured here really well, and I don't fault them for this in the slightest. I think that it was really, really well handled. So yeah, I was happy with it.
Yeah, no, it didn't seem to. It didn't seem out of place.
Scene. It is a badass scene too. So
well, it was. I felt so bad for all these XBs, but then later, she gets her comeuppance kind of. Well, a little bit. Okay, so Seven, doing more awesome Borg stuff. Here's her interfacing
Yeah.
with the ship.
See, so he starts pointing out that they're dying, that Borg are starting to die on the ship. So she gets all peeved, and she realized that her only chance and their only chance is for her to like do this now. And so this is where she like activates the thing. She's like, screw it, we're becoming Borg again. We're doing this out of survival. And so boom.
Yeah.
And now her entire spine was replaced with metallic or like technological components. So this and this is because she is a queen replacement. So she was one of probably millions of Borg females designated as possible queens, and she was one of the ones that were on the higher list that the collective essentially allowed her to get de-assimilated onto Voyager so that she could learn about Voyager in a closed space before being returned back to the Borg to then lead the attack on the humans on the Federation. That was the plan all along. And we see that this is actually kind of their MO. So the Borg, they originate from the Delta Quadrant in a small section, and what they do is they have transwarp nodes all over the place that go to all over the places, but they can't go to anywhere they want to. They just have nodes that come out at certain places. Where those nodes come out, they identify big threats like federations or large groups of civilizations that could pose a threat should they retaliate, or individual places where it's good to where it's good pickings for like biological assimilation or technological assimilation, and they kind of branch out from those locations all over the galaxy, and then they fly back and forth through the transwarp tubes. So that's the a very brief synopsis on how they work and how they function. The Federation was considered a sizable threat to them. So their goal was from the beginning to take them to combat them, but each time they tried, they kept on running into problems and getting their butts kicked. So basically, she was designated as this leader who would then take over the Borg and use this as an individual and just continue to assimilate things while thinking as an individual. So yeah, very interesting. And the fact that they included the fact that they're relating a lot of this to the current story with Seven makes me really happy just overall, because this is a really good addition to her story in general, and there's a lot of stuff that she has to kind of grow from, and really interesting. One of my absolute favorite characters, and I'm really interested to know exactly where it goes from here. So
Yeah. Shua in the chat says, I really expect her to start to wreck the galaxy with her new cube. Yeah, I'm hoping we see some awesome stuff with Seven owning of this Borg cube. Anyway, so yes, she does have the interface in her spine, but man, those are going to be some nasty holes in her jacket, don't you think?
yeah,
It's a nice jacket. All right, another shot of her looking really cool. And it's interesting because she's got one biological eye and one cybernetic eye, and yet they both do this green demon thing. So interesting. It's a cool effect, but I don't know how.
It's the nanites in her system.
Oh yeah. Oh okay. Yeah, that makes sense. They love green. They love making everything green.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So the Romulans open up bunch of hatches on the ship and blast all of the unreclaimed drones out into space. It's a really
you're going too far. This is where the ship is repairing itself. It's starting to activate, and there's tons of like little robots that come out.
I thought we saw that earlier.
Look like locust guys, and they start to put the. Oh no! Sorry. Sorry. You're right. No, this is where they blow the bodies out. Yeah.
So, and she, yeah. Which is too bad. I wanted to see some Borg drones under Seven's control, whooping some Romulan butt, but
oh, they have that in here.
Well, we did see a little bit with the XBs in a minute. Okay, so a little conversation scene in the mess hall. No, what would you call it? The place where they all eat in the ship, the dining hall. And Shoji's like, okay, they now know where the planet is because of me, so she smashes the table, showing that she's got great power and is fairly dangerous. If she doesn't keep it under control. And then she goes off and hacks the ship, basically. It says, no, we're not going to Deep Space 12. I'm just taking this ship to my home planet. Cool shot here, outside of a ship.
Mm-hmm.
And now, and then Rios sings a lullaby to power down everything, all the security measures that...
Yeah, he's really pissed off that she's taken over the ship by force, and then he apparently has a lullaby that he's worked in, so the dude just sings it and it forcibly shuts down the ship, which is really, again, awesome.
Yeah. Galley, that's right, Shua, thank you. The galley. Couldn't remember the word. Anyway, this is all kind of interesting stuff, but not really the meat of the episode here, so... Then Rios agrees to help her get to the planet, and she was going to take the ship through the transwarp conduit, but she hadn't accounted for a number of things they needed, and so they would have been destroyed in the process, basically. So he's like, okay, I'll help you do this right, and we'll have the different fields and things in place so that our ship doesn't get sheared apart. Picard sits down to fly the ship and is like, I don't know how to work this. So it's now this is kind of unfortunate that Picard, like, he's kind of the moral center, the driving force behind this show, but in these last few episodes he's almost become a side character in his own show.
Not really. I think they're showing his age, right? So he sits down it's like, yes, we will do it her way. Sits down on the captain's chair. I will activate the thing and we will... I have no idea what I'm doing here.
Yeah, no, it's a good moment.
It's technology is
exactly. It's like, okay, boomer. Yeah, it makes sense. It does, but like this is his one moment in the show where he does anything interesting in this episode.
No,
other
I'd
than
say
just
that
kind of having conversations with people.
He confronts a couple of things. He reassures her, and I think that's totally fine. I think this is fine. Yeah, he's not prevalent in this particular episode, but I think that's I think that's fine.
Yeah. Anyway, just the thought. He seemed almost superfluous in this episode, but anyway, they're off. They are going to go through the trans... Okay, so now all the Romulans are leaving the cube. So Seven's now got a... Well, okay, there's still some Romulans on it here. But here, Narissa's walking with her Centurion guy, guard, whatever. And then the XBs come from behind and just snap him.
Like, snap his neck without him, like, even realizing... And then she just keeps on talking to him when she realizes that she's being surrounded, and it was really, really funny.
Yeah.
Again, when you're dealing with the queen bee or like somebody like who's the boss, don't try and capture them. Just kill them. It's so much faster. Just like drop them, drop it while it's hot. Just drop it while it's hot, and then you just move on. And that's what you should do.
And here she is, angry. And looking a little bit not right in the head. And then I can't you'll have to remind me, and I don't know why, because I watched the episode twice. How does that scene end?
She gets dogpiled basically by the XBs, and then she's teleported out of the ship onto one of the other ships in...
That's the second time or third time in this series that she's escaped from a situation by being transported
which, I mean, you start to get tired, and again, if you're smart, you remember as just again in general, if you're dealing with the big bad boss,
Yeah.
you put them under as quickly as you can. This is one of the things that I really like about. Oh darn, I can't remember the game's name. Oh, no, it's this music based RPG. It's not, when I say music based, it's not actually music based. It's this RPG where you're playing as these characters. It's like Asian inspired adventure game, kind of like Final Fantasy or Monster Quest or whatever. And there's this one character who it's just like foretelling. Eternal Sonata. Thank you. So Eternal Sonata, the main like badass in that game, the main guy that you play. Um, every time they encounter one of these bosses that disappears and like he's getting away like like any Saturday morning cartoon villain. They're like, "Aha! I'm going to dart off. You'll never catch me. Oh, I'm going to get you next time, Gadget." He shows up like in the next scene, and the dude's like, "I'm running away," and he's like, "No, actually, I'm just gonna kill you now." And he's like, "But you can't. You'll be the bad guy." And he's like, "Well, no, I'm just pretty sure that." Killing you will solve most of the problems that we're facing in this area, and it's not like you it's not like you don't deserve it. I mean, you did literally murder a whole bunch of people. Letting you go would kind of be like, I don't know, being a party to murder. Just saying. So he offs them, and it's a really great thing. Anyways, I thought it was kind of relevant to this, but yeah.
Well, yeah.
Like, don't let these people go. Like, don't let them go. Oh, I hate shows that let the bad guys go. They just committed genocide, but if we kill them, then we're just like they are. It's like,
No.
no,
That is illogical.
that is illogical. Just deal with it. Yeah. How many
Oh,
things?
I should go back. We didn't actually talk about this picture. So she disconnects from the cube, and then he's like, "You gonna assimilate me now?" And yeah.
Yes,
But there's
really
she says an interesting line. Annika still has work to do.
Yeah, because she's
she
speaking as a collective, and then the collective disconnects. Now we don't know whether or not the collective is still functioning between them. We assume that at the moment, I'm assuming that the whole collective has been shut off again, because the individuality is something that she values and was able to convince all of the Borg on the ship that this is a required thing. So, and I believe it's the direction that they're going to kind of go with this. So I believe that that it was disconnected. Yeah. So.
All right. So this is them heading into the transwarp conduit, correct?
Yeah, so this is them heading into the transwarp conduit, and immediately following this, we discover that as soon as they go in, that dun 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 dun, there's a hidden ship that follows them in. Oh, it's got green light on the back. Oh, sorry, no, that's not that part yet.
No.
That's the last scene that happens in the show. I thought we were already there. No, this is where they're sitting together talking, and they're like, "Yes, let's go." And Picard is encouraging them, and blah 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 blah. So yeah.
So this compass thing that she got from Kestra.
She sets the compass down, and I have a good line for this. And here we see the introduction of Jack Sparrow's compass, telling her what she wants and what direction it's in.
Yeah. Same universe as Pirates of the Caribbean. Mm-hmm. Confirmed. All right. So this looks remarkably like something that appears in the opening credits to this show. But so they go into the transwarp conduit, and then you said there's a ship that follows them in.
Yeah. Then the last like 2 seconds of the episode, which is really hard to catch. I almost missed it. Narek's ship like basically decloaks off their port side and like poof, goes into the hull. Which again, they don't explain how any of that happened at all. It's like okay.
Well, hopefully next episode.
Yeah. So next episode, this is where we'll start to get the the manure shall hit the fan, and then we shall punch the highway
Yeah. All right. This one,
onto the end of the series.
I've got five laughing Picards up because I'm giving this one a 4.5832 out of 5. So that rounds up to 5.
Yeah.
This was a really good episode. I mean, it had some of the common problems that all the episodes in this series have had. Some writing conveniences, some things that are just... Oh yeah, Picard said something so stupid in this episode that it was a major... So I am going to give it a face-palming... not a... Where's my skeptical Riker? There he is. So I'm giving it a skeptical Riker because Picard said something so dumb. And he basically explains away the coming apocalypse of the destroyer and the synthetic life and blah blah blah. He's like, well, what Commodore O saw and put into what was in this beacon and the images she put into Dr. Jarate's head, this isn't going to happen again because we don't have to let it happen. We've got some amazing tools at our disposal, like our openness and our curiosity and our tolerance. And I can't remember the exact words he uses, but
Yeah.
I was like, this is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Like,
So I was less annoyed with that particular scene because I like so there's and I want to talk about this whole situation a little bit now that we've kind of gone through it. So we don't really know exactly what's being said here. In fact, it's about akin to the flashbacks that Commander Shepard gets in the first Mass Effect game. There's a lot of imagery that doesn't make sense, that is just kind of all over the place, and you don't really understand the end game concept until kind of like you kind of discover more or less a lot of stuff into the second and the third game. But there's two things to kind of go. Either they created synthetic life and that synthetic life revolted against them, caused a huge war, they lost all their lives, and the last vestiges of the dying race basically built this warning. Or, and they're really starting to rip off of Mass Effect here. They built synthetic life. Synthetic life hit a particular zenith of existence, and this summoned some great darkness from beyond that came into the galaxy and basically purged the galaxy of life until there was no more synthetic life left, and the other race was the other races, whatever, that were left basically, like, again, dying in their dying breaths, managed to like throw together a handful of warning signs and then faded into obscurity.
yeah.
So in the first example of like, well, we tried this once before and we created a race that ended up killing us and it was all really terrible. It's like, so how many times did people try to establish warp drive or nuclear fusion that resulted in a devastating, destruction of their planet, city, or whatever? Doesn't mean that you can't do it. Doesn't mean that you shouldn't try. And that, I think, if that's his point there, totally merits up. Then when he says, again, it's our creativity and whatnot, I actually agree with the creativity. Not so much the other stuff that he says, but if you're going to withhold your technology and put yourself into a hole because you're afraid of going forward past a particular point, or utilizing a particular type of science that can actually elevate you past, I think this is actually, again, very accurate, because what Picard is saying here is that, look, curiosity has to push to these boundaries. If there's a danger to creating this technology, that's fine. There's a danger to creating the technology. But there is in no way, shape, or form a need for us to put ourselves back into the dark ages just because we're afraid of the future. It's like we have to face that future, otherwise we'll stagnate. And when you look at Vulcan culture, especially scientific Vulcan culture, and when you look at Romulan scientific culture, they both had the exact same problem, is that they were both starting to stagnate because they were not willing to push themselves past this fear of utilizing computer and robotics technology. And you see this is a big theme throughout throughout Star Trek in general. The Vulcans really kind of like, they had hit the zenith of technology and they weren't really progressing, and it took Starfleet and a bunch of other scientists who were thinking outside of the box of what they could, that forced them to reevaluate things. There was a time where it was heretical, scientifically heretical, not like belief heretical, even though that's kind of what they are. That the Vulcans refused to believe that time travel was possible because one of their scientists said it's not possible, and anybody who thinks it is illogical. And everybody went, "Oh, illogical! Oh, we're not illogical. Yes, time travel doesn't exist. Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah." Is that kind of like mentality, and that's what kept the Vulcans from becoming essentially what Earth ended up becoming, even though they had, like 200-300 years over top of them. And you have this exact, or thousands, I can't remember how much it is. And then you have the exact same situation with the Vulcans, or with the Romulans. They were a dying civilization because of all of their control and problems and cultural issues, but as well, like technologically, they were being left behind by the Federation, and it was in desperation to stop the Federation from advancing past where they were, that ended up resulting in them essentially blowing up their own star system. So this is the point that I think he was making. I don't think he made it very well, but
No,
this
it
is
just
something that,
sounded like
yeah, it
sounded
sounded
like
terrible,
hippy
right?
dippy,
Yeah.
make love not war kind of
Yeah.
buzzwords. But I mean,
But
like, he has a point. Like, yeah, if you have, if you take a different approach, it doesn't necessarily end in destruction. I mean,
mhm.
although this whole conversation is making me think of that Voyager episode, the Omega Directive, which we
Yeah.
don't have
Yes.
time to get into
Which
right now, but like where they discover something that, or they already know about it, but
mhm.
it's this secret directive of Starfleet of, if your scanners pick up this particular molecule, you have to destroy it because it could potentially destroy subspace and make warp travel impossible. And so there's some lines that Starfleet is like, no, we can't go there. But anyway, I don't want to get into that right now because that'll take hours if we start talking about that. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think this, as far as where they're going with this, like what led to the destruction that you were talking about before, that is an interesting question. Is it just that
Yeah.
synthetic life evolves to a point where they cause chaos, or is it, like you said, is there some entity out there that's going to be summoned? And it sounded like they were talking about that because they referenced back to the Cochrane, like the warp drive thing, and how
Yeah.
as soon as you hit the warp drive threshold, somebody shows up.
Yeah.
And
And I um frankly, I'm okay with this storyline because the Reaper story was actually quite interesting and I really enjoyed it. And I think that and I miss Mass Effect, so I'm actually okay with them encountering this. I think this would actually be an interesting twist. It's certainly been done before, but again, basically all Star Trek has been done before. So this would be something new and interesting to open up the door, and could create a lot of story writing, especially if the threat wasn't actually as dangerous or imposing as they're suggesting that it might be. If the Federation actually does provide a challenge to whatever this entity is showing up, who's like shows up and says, "All right, you guys have now a certain level of android synthetic life. We're gonna wipe out all synthetic and biological life, that like all warp." Now, mind you, the fact that they have a whole bunch of records but they don't know why or how or whatever, or maybe this is a galactic reset that has happened before, but they don't have any evidence of it. This is really interesting. So tentatively, I'm like, ooh, okay, I'm interested to see where this goes. I want to know where this goes, but if they screw this up, then they're really going to fall on their face. Like if they don't nail this thing, basically it's like watching a figure skater or watching a gymnast. You can tell that they're going in for the triple axel spin thing or quadruple axel spin thing, which very few people man, or the what is it in Blades of Fury? It's like the Iron Lotus or whatever. It's like like we know for sure that this is potentially could be like we know that they're going into this. If they don't stick that landing perfectly, bad things are going to happen. Bad things just every bad thing imaginable is going to happen all at once.
Right.
So it's like, oh,
well, we've got 2 more episodes. We've got 7 of 9 in the Borg cube. We've got other things happening. It's going to be very interesting to see how they wrap this up. What do you rate this episode, Saib?
So I'm going to give it 5, because again, it was like 4.51437.9.
Yeah, kind of rounds up to a 5, yeah.
So it kind of rounds up to a 5. They're setting the precedent. The acting again was really decent in this. There's a handful of actors that there's only one right now that I'm really annoyed with, but just generally speaking, the acting has been marvelous. The writing has been but the acting and that's what I mean. You can tell that the actors really are trying and they're doing a good job, and they're not coming in here with we've seen shows before where they do a kind of like a reboot and they bring in these older characters who just kind of walk on the stage, and you can tell that they're not really trying, that they're just going through the motions, right? There was another sci-fi show that did that recently, and it was so poorly written and so poorly acted that it was just kind of blah. It was just gross, and you felt insulted. You felt like somebody showed up and spat in your cereal. It was really just terrible. And you're like, okay, I'm just disgusted. I'm just going to leave now. But in this, we see, especially with Picard and especially with 709, where they're really acting to their best ability, and they're picking up where they let go, and they're just like, let's do this, and they're just acting the ever-living stuff out of it. So this is where I give it a 5, not because the writing's good. The writing right now is somewhat sort of passable, sort of, with many caveats, but the acting, despite the bad writing, the actors are doing a real good job with what they've got, and they don't have much to work with, but they're doing an amazing job with what they have. So yeah.
That scene with the 5 holograms was pretty cleverly written, in my opinion. But it's the overall plot. It's the overall plot.
I would say that was cleverly directed, not cleverly written necessarily.
Well, the dialogue was pretty funny. I think the dialogue, in my opinion, has generally been okay.
I like where the Scottish guy says his line. He just rambles off this line, and he looks over at him and she's like, "That."
It's not even
Isn't
even
a language. Yeah. The computer can't translate what you're saying.
Okay, everybody, we're gonna wrap up the show here. Thank you so much for watching. Please do slam that like button if you enjoyed this episode of our Picard review show. 2 more to go for the first season, and so we'll see you the next 2 Mondays for the Picard review show. It'll be interesting to see how this show wraps up. We're glad for all of you that have joined us today, and we're active in the live chat. If you are listening after the fact, please do leave comments below. Let us know what you thought, and we will talk to you again very soon.